Do you have a home equity line of credit or are interested in applying for one? Well, then you might want to watch this video. I personally believe that a Heloc is an extremely powerful tool if used correctly. But I'm gonna be honest with you, if you end up using a Heloc for the wrong purposes or the wrong way, it's gonna set you back years. So that's why in this video, we will be going over a home equity line of credit so that you have a better understanding if a home equity line of credit is the right option for you. A couple years ago, when I used my home equity line of credit to purchase a rental property, I wish I was able to look back on a video like this so that I can truly understand and avoid a lot of mistakes by looking at the pros and cons of using one. And hopefully this video makes you avoid some of the mistakes that I had to go through the hard way. So if you're watching this, you probably have a good understanding of what a home equity line of credit is, and it's very simple. A Heloc is a line of credit that you apply for based off of the home equity in your property, right? It takes a second position to the mortgage, but can still default on your home if you do not pay it back, hence why you need to use it smartly. So use it wisely, and typically there is two parts to a home equity line of credit. The draw period, to where you can draw from it and use it like a revolving line of credit that it is, and there is a repayment period to where you can't draw from it anymore and you make interest and principal payments until you completely pay it off. And you can literally use your Heloc for whatever you want. The great thing is you don't have to go to the bank, ask permission for something that you have to use it on, and that's why I like comparing it to a credit card. And to give you examples, I've used mine for purchasing rental property as well as doing renovations on properties. Some other ways you can use it is by investing in your business, having it for emergency purposes only, or consolidating your debt. And honestly, you should not be using a product like this if you cannot afford it and if you do not have a clear plan on paying it back. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the pros and cons of using a home equity line of credit. And at the end of the video, I'm actually going to give you my 3 rules when investing my Heloc so that you do not get into a bad situation. So stick around for that. Starting with the flexibility of a home equity line of credit. Like you heard earlier, I compared it to a credit card. The great thing about it is that you can easily go out and draw your funds, use it for whatever you want. You can pay it back in full and then reuse the same amount if you'd like. So right when you get approved for it, you can go ahead and start using it right away. But the thing you want to be careful for is being irresponsible with it, but we'll get into that. Second pro is that you only have to pay interest on the money that you use during the draw period. For example, when we purchased our rental property, we put 20 grand from our home equity line of credit towards that property, and we only had to pay interest only payments, meaning that our payment on 20 grand ended up being about $150 a month. And although none of that goes to the principal, we could apply more towards it from the cash flow that we're receiving for the rental property. So the great thing is that you can use a large chunk of it and not have a huge monthly payment. Moving on to the potential appreciation in a property by using your Heloc. A great way, and what I see a lot of people doing, is using their Heloc funds in order to renovate their property they're currently living in or a secondary property in order to force appreciation into that building by renovating it up to market standards and maybe even a little bit more than market standards so that you have an extremely nice property. So when you do go and sell that property, maybe you put 20 grand into your property, you might be able to sell it for an extra $50,000. Number 4, it's revolving credit. Like I mentioned before, you can use it, pay it off, and then use it again. There's nothing stopping you from using it. It's very similar to a credit card. But you want to be careful because after the 10-year period of using it, then it would go into the repayment phase to where you cannot draw any more from it and you will have to start paying towards the principal and the interest. And the final pro is that it is an amazing feature to be able to have access to quick cash. And what I mean by that is that if an emergency were to come up or you have a great investment opportunity to go ahead and tackle, being able to draw from that Heloc and have that quick cash available so that you can use it right away, that holds a lot of value instead of having to rush around, scatter things, maybe even sell a couple things in order to get the cash before taking on an investment opportunity, to which it might be gone by then. And when there are pros, there has to be cons. The biggest risk and the most talked about is that you could potentially lose your property. If you use a Heloc and you do not pay it back, then technically they can come after your house and seize your assets. At the end of the day, it is a secured loan, so it's secured on your primary residence. That's why I mentioned earlier, always have a plan and do not borrow more than you can actually afford. Moving on to con number 2, the potential for over borrowing. Now I fall victim to this as well, but when you have a lot of cash sitting there in a home equity line of credit and you're able to use it, it may tempt some people to go ahead and spend it on bad purchases, like a brand new car. And when you make these bad purchases, you increase your debt and your financial strain. So honestly, if you have discipline, this could be a great product for you, but if you don't and you are easily tempted, you might want to stay clear. Next is the risk of rates increasing. Now, with a home equity line of credit, typically, now there are some times that it's a fixed rate, but more times than not, it is a variable rate interest rate, meaning that it's based off of the prime rate of the market. So for example, when I had my home equity line of credit, I got it at a 4.5% interest rate. Now that stayed that way for about a year, but then the market quickly went up and interest rates went closer to about 8 or 9%. And when I borrowed the money at the 4.5%, it didn't matter because now that it's 8%, you're being charged interest 8% on the money that you borrowed. So it can quickly go up very, very fast. And if you do not account for that in your numbers and being able to pay it back, you could be stuck in a very bad situation. And lastly, there is a cost associated with the application process because the bank has to be able to tell what your home is valued on. And if they end up ordering a appraisal to go out there and tell them what it's worth, you will have to pay for the cost of the appraisal, but you'll also have to potentially pay more in taxes if they file it and attach it to your house. So keep in mind all of the costs before applying. Now it's time to get into my 3 rules when it comes to using a home equity line of credit. And this is based off of the mistakes I made and the lessons I learned along the process. Number 1, do not use your home equity line of credit if you cannot afford it. And what I mean by that, even if you're investing this, let's say like I did to invest into a rental property, right? If you end up getting cash flow from that property and that cash flow is your plan on paying back this Heloc, that's a great plan until one of the tenants moves out and you now have a vacancy and now you're losing money on the property, but then you have to go and fix the hot water heater and you have to pay for the turnover of the unit and all these expenses start wrapping up that it kills your whole year of cash flow. And with the cherry on top, you cannot pay that back because you over leveraged and borrow more than what you could actually afford. Now you might be thinking if it cash flows enough, I'll be fine, but this is my 3 rules from my mistakes, like I said, and I would highly advise you follow them or at least listen to them and keep them top of mind when making a decision. Rule number 2 is to always adjust for a higher interest rate. So like I said earlier in the video, when I first applied, I had a 4.5% interest rate. And then now currently, as I'm making this video, it's about 8.5%. So my interest rate basically doubled. And with a doubled interest rate comes a higher monthly payment. And like I said, if you cannot afford that or even afford in the adjustment of a higher interest rate, you probably should not be borrowing it. And my 3rd and final rule is that only use a home equity line of credit for shorter term debt. And for me personally, that is less than 3 years. And the reason I have this rule is because when I used my Heloc, I was over leveraged at the time. Even though everything panned out, I was still over leveraged. And the last thing you want to be is over leveraged. Because like I said, if you use your whole Heloc to put down on a rental property or to do a renovation in your house and then your car blows up, or you have a family emergency and you can't pull from that anymore and you have to scrounge up some cash and then you have this monthly payment on top of you, just overall, using a home equity line of credit for shorter term debt is the best way to go in my opinion. So that's why I have it in here. Hopefully this video helped you and hopefully the rules that I set for myself can be somewhat beneficial for you as you decide if a Heloc is the best option for you. And if you are still thinking about using a home equity line of credit, I'm interested to know what you plan on using it for. So go ahead and down in the comment section and let me know. I'd love to hear. Thank you, and I will see you guys in the next one. Happy investing.